Okay.
So are you able to pull up everyone's answers there, Shema?
Yes. So I can see. You see the getting to know you on the screen? Everybody's able to log in? Okay. We're still at 35, 36 people, depending on. Okay, we're getting there. We're getting there.
We give maybe everyone a minute or so to get their answers in, and then we'll kind of share collectively.
Okay, so I see it's slowing down a little, so we're just going to go ahead and get started. So on your screen, you're going to see just 2 questions come up. So once you answer one, we'll move on to the next. So it's just to get to know a tiny bit more about you. So the first question is, which department or program are you in? So let us know what faculty you currently represent. You can just type it in and it'll pop up on our screen here.
Okay, so we have human kinetics, political science, social work, computer science. Seems like we have a lot of different programs here today, which is great.
Extremely diverse. Very cool.
Film, math.
Lots of psychology today. Very cool. All right, awesome. Okay. So now that we know a bit more about the disciplines you're coming from, okay, electrical engineering just went up, lots from engineering. Okay, let's move on to the next question. Are you a GA, TA, or an instructor, something else? Let us know in the poll.
Lots of GAs, it looks like, which is great because a lot of what we're going to talk about today is, helping you to prepare for some GA responsibilities, such as teaching labs or tutorials, perhaps, leading online discussions or guest lecturing. So some of the content today will definitely help with that.
Cool. I think that's everybody now. So lots of GAs today, but also we have teaching assistants, some instructors, some other. Curious to know what's represented in that category. But now that we kind of got to know a bit about who sort of makes up the group that we have today, it's really nice to see that we have a very diverse bunch in terms of background or discipline. And something that we want to really emphasize today is that regardless of field of education you're coming from, what discipline, what faculty, we'll all come to learn that really the foundation or the basis of a really effective or good lecture stays the same across the board, regardless of the discipline. So hopefully, again, by the end of today's session, you'll be able to take something that you can use in your own discipline, regardless of what it may be. So that was really cool to see. So I'm glad we went ahead and did that. So I'm just going to go back to sharing our slides. Okay. So we're going to follow that up with another fun activity that we've called the Reflection Gallery. So this is something that Irene and I used to do in person, where we'd have, people walking around and writing things down and all that. But we've actually adapted this to an online setting. And what it is a little activity where we ask you, we have just 4 questions prepared, and Irene has posted the link in our chat. So you can go ahead and basically walk through each of those 4 questions. They're super quick. Just leave some short responses, whatever immediately pops into your mind. And then we're all going to come back in about 3 minutes and debrief as a group and see what you guys came up with. So this is a way for us to find out just how much you already know about lecturing before we get into the bulk of our content today. So go ahead, just click the link and fill out your answers for each of the short 4 questions that you see on your screen.
Of course, we'll pull them up and we'll be able to see all of your responses.
Okay, so I see a lot of responses coming in already. So these are the answers that you guys have been inputting in the form. So good to see a really wide variety of responses. So we're going to sort of go through these and see what patterns we can kind of glean from them. But I see a lot of sort of similar responses overall.
Do we want to read some of the responses here so we can?
Okay, so awesome. I think we've got a really solid group of responses. So we're going to go ahead and come back here. You can fill out if you're still filling any last questions. But we're going to come back and look at the responses that you guys came up with. So I'm going to go through the first question to begin with. So we asked you, just to start off with, what was a characteristic of the worst lecture that you've attended? So a lot of you guys said monotone, disorganized, no interaction, really long slides, couldn't even hear the professor, went totally off topic, a lot of personality issues, just reading off slides. Again, some of the sort of common responses, just no engagement, total disinterest, discipline through fear. That kind of freaks me out. But yeah, that's very worrying. But also, it goes to show how many of you guys have just experienced some of these common issues. So again, it sounds like you've all sort of been there, done that, had some of these common issues that you've went through, so you know what a bad lecture kind of looks like. And we're going to try to help you avoid all those characteristics. So I'll pass it over to Irene to go over the next question.
Yeah. Okay. So the next question was, what was the characteristic of the best lecture you've attended? So looking on the other side of things here. So very vibrant and informative, very engaged, lots of group discussion. The person was passionate about the material. So it really sounds actually like you're tapping into a lot of the things we're going to talk about today in terms of some active learning type of activities and how that can be beneficial. Also engaging with the lecture with group work, having an agenda before the lecture. So it sounds like the main themes here are really, the engagement and then also the organization of things. So making sure that things are in order and very easy to understand and there's a good flow there.
Awesome. So moving on to the third question, we asked you, what do you think is the purpose of lecturing, or what do you see to be the purpose of lecturing? So I noticed a lot of transmitting knowledge, transmitting information. A lot of you even said connecting with students. But what I noticed the most was it's about imparting information. It's about sharing content. It's about sharing concepts and things like that. So a lot of times lecturing is sometimes used interchangeably with a class, but we want to highlight here that lecturing is simply a teaching method that you can incorporate into your class. And we're going to talk about a lot of different things besides lecturing or to help accentuate your lecturing that you can do. But a lot of it is, yes, essentially imparting information. And a lot of it kind of tends to be one-sided as well, but we're going to also talk today about some ways that you can really be engaging students and pulling them in rather than transmitting information sort of in a one-way street kind of way. Obviously, there's a time and place for that when you're, lecturing to certain groups or in certain classes, but we're going to discuss that in the next question. So I'll pass it on to Irene again.
So last question here is, when should lecturing be used? And I see the first answer was when needed, so I like that response. But during lecture sessions, in large classes, when material needs to be conveyed, in every class, to cover course. Yeah, that would be definitely interesting to see. So when there's an interest of learning a new thing. So yeah, lecturing can definitely, we don't want it to come across that lecturing isn't effective. It definitely can be. It's just kind of knowing when. So sometimes it's nice to lecture when you really want to compile a lot of different information. Perhaps if there's, not where all of your course material isn't within one resource, such as a textbook, for example. So it's nice to lecture in order to compile all this information and gathering information from different sources and putting it into one file, I guess you could say, or one presentation.
Awesome. So it was really great to sort of find out where everybody sort of stands and how much you know about lecturing so far. So we're going to be revisiting a lot of these themes and ideas throughout the session today. So that was a really great run. So thank you guys for participating. And we're just going to go ahead and move on with the session.
Okay. I don't see the slide. That could be my screen.
Okay. Let me make sure it's there.
We apologize for any technical difficulties along the way. We're definitely still learning the online learning and teaching process, so bear with us.
Absolutely. And this might be something you encounter, so rest assured. Okay. Okay, I think that does it.
There you go. All right, so a main component of the workshop today will be focused on the BOPS model for lesson planning. And so the BOPS is an acronym that represents various components that make up an effective lesson plan. So the B is for bridge in, O stands for outcomes, then P is for pre-assessment, the next P is participatory learning activities, and the last P represents post-assessment, and S is for summary. So we're going to dive into each of these acronyms in a little bit more detail throughout the next couple slides and throughout the rest of the workshop.
So the first letter in the fun acronym BOPS is called the bridge-in. So we also like to call this the hook. And your bridge-in or your hook is something that's going to really grab attention and set the stage and set the tone for the rest of your class that day. So it should be something that aligns with the overall goal or learning outcome of your lecture. So what are you really trying to get students to do or to think about in class that day? So it doesn't have to be something that's like super overly dramatic or something that's like really funny that's going to grab their attention. You can do this in a variety of ways that are sort of that you're sort of comfortable with, but yet still gauge or gain students' attention. So it's really critical in the first 1 to 2 minutes of your class to grab students' attention, because, and not to scare you, but it's really hard to sort of refocus everyone if they haven't already been engaged from the onset of the class. So it's going to be really important that you incorporate some sort of hook or bridge in from the beginning of your class to ensure that at least they have the attention from the beginning that you can then scaffold throughout the rest of your class that day. So some examples of a bridge-in that you could do would be pose a question at the beginning of class, do a relevant icebreaker activity with everyone, share a relevant video or a photograph to generate some discussion. So there's lots of ways that you can go about, getting people's interest from the beginning. So we actually had a hook at the beginning of our session today, and we're going to do a sort of pop quiz right now. So you're going to see a poll pop up on your screen, and we want to ask you, what was our hook at the beginning of our session today? So we're going to see if you were paying attention or if we got your attention. So go ahead and answer the poll that pops up on your screen.
So we'll just give you about a minute to choose your option.
Okay.
All right. So we had most people say the quote at the beginning, which is correct. So I'm glad most of you caught on to that. Yeah, we really wanted to draw in your attention with a quote to really try to capture what we're going to be talking about today, which is really trying to engage student in lectures.
Yeah, and we had the quote up before we even started talking. So really, when students sort of sign on or walk into class or anything like that, there's already something there that sort of hopefully gets their attention that they can be thinking about as class starts. So again, lots of ways to go about this. And we sort of did a couple different things after the quote too, just to like build up the attention. So there's lots of ways you can go about it. But that was just a strategy we wanted to share. So glad that kind of stuck. So the next letter that follows in BOPS is outcomes, or more specifically, the learning outcomes. So these are measurable statements that specify what the learner or the student is expected to be able to know or be able to do by the end of the lecture. So what you're going to see here on your screen is something called constructive alignment. So sort of like a wheel. Sorry, is that coming up?
Yeah, looks good.
Okay, perfect. So constructive alignment is basically the idea that every component in your class is sort of well aligned and well thought out and intentional. So the learning outcomes, which are these statements, which we had at the beginning of the session today, are things that we want to keep at the heart of our teaching and our planning. So our learning outcomes should be aligned with our teaching methods, so how we're going to teach these things, which in turn should be aligned with our assessment. So how do we even test that you actually learn these things? So every aspect of our planning and our teaching, these things are all well aligned and well thought out. So learning outcomes also create a sense of accountability for both you as an instructor and for the students. So for you as an instructor, you can hold yourself accountable. Like, am I teaching the things that I'm actually saying that students should be able to do? Am I doing that effectively? Am I using the right teaching methods? And for students too, they can, if they refer to the learning outcomes, they can gauge whether the class is actually helping them to learn these things or not. So I like to also use learning outcomes in classes to explain to students why we're doing something. So when they find out the sort of why behind it, they kind of get a better idea of why they're doing what they're doing. So for example, in a class I GA'd, we had sort of a lot to do with mapping and geography, and it was a history class. So I knew a lot of students had questions like, why are we doing so much geography in history class? Well, because one of the learning outcomes is that by the end of the course, students should be able to make connections between history and geography. So when we had a class where we were doing mapping activities and things like that in preparation for their map quiz that semester, I would explain to them, well, hey, if you refer back to the outcomes on your syllabus, we're supposed to be learning these connections between history and geography to strengthen your sort of historical depth and perception. So once they really understood why we were doing something, it really helped them see how important it was. So use learning outcomes not only to plan in throughout your sessions, but also to sort of open the communication between students and provide more transparency. So this is why we want to focus so much on the outcomes, and you're going to see this wheel throughout the session today because it's so central to good planning and good teaching. So we're going to come back to this later, but keep this in mind for now. So now that we've covered a good chunk of content so far, we want to pause for some questions. So as Irene mentioned at the beginning, if you have any questions up until what we covered so far, please feel free to leave them in the chat or use the raise hand function, and we will take any questions if you want to say them out loud. So we're going to do this for just 2 minutes. So if you have any questions, please feel free to leave them for us right now. So we'll pause now and see if you guys have any questions. I think we're good to move on. If anybody doesn't have any questions.
There'll be other opportunities throughout the workshop as well for questions.
Absolutely. Okay, so we'll move on.
Okay, so the next acronym of BOPS is pre-assessment. So pre-assessment is used prior to introducing a new topic or at the beginning of the semester to test students' knowledge. So the pre-assessment can serve a couple different purposes. So the first is that it can help instructors gain insight about students' current knowledge of the subject matter to be able to modify the lecture based on this knowledge. So for example, you may want, by doing a pre-assessment, you may gain information regarding, if students have more knowledge than you expected, or vice versa, so you can kind of adapt your lecturing accordingly. So if they do seem to have more knowledge than anticipated, you can just provide more of an overview of the material rather than an in-depth explanation. But it can also help students to think and reflect about what they already know about a topic. So here's an example on the slide of a type of pre-assessment, which is called 3-2-1. And this involves asking students to reflect on a proposed topic and list 3 things that they've previously learned about this topic, to list 2 things that they would like to know about the topic, and 1 question that they have about that topic. So a few years ago, I taught a course on imagery in sport. So it was all about visualizing yourself in a sport environment. So I implemented this type of pre-assessment with my students at the beginning of the course because I really wanted to know their knowledge of imagery coming in. So I asked them, 3 things that they know about imagery, 2 things that they'd like to know about imagery, and 1 question that they have about imagery. So that way I could try to incorporate the things that they'd like to know into my lectures and also try to answer any questions that they had. All right, so as mentioned earlier on in this workshop, requiring students to just sit quietly in a lecture and take notes and just read books or articles does not ensure that they are able to understand the information effectively. So the next acronym of the BOPS model requires students to use the material they have learned and not just acquire it. So participatory learning consists of students playing an active role in the learning process by partaking in various activities that are related to the course material. So this places a greater responsibility on the learner rather than the instructor. So in other words, students are placed in a situation where they do more than just listen, and they're challenged to think for themselves. So this kind of ties back into the reflection gallery activity that we did, where we asked you about your worst and best lecturing experiences, and it seems like a lot of the best lecturing experiences were around these types of participatory learning activities, really getting students involved. So it does require students to problem solve, critically think, it allows them to make their own decision making. And there has been quite a bit of research that's been done on these types of activities, and it's found that the more you incorporate participatory learning activities into the lectures, it can facilitate attention and comprehension. And it is important to know that these don't have to take the entire class period, but they can be dispersed periodically throughout a lecture. So it is nice to have these activities complement a traditional lecture, perhaps with PowerPoint slides or where you're presenting material. It can help to reinforce that understanding. And research has also shown that students typically stop paying attention, or their attention declines after about 20 minutes once the lecture has started. So I guess a good rule of thumb is to try to incorporate these activities, if possible, every 20 minutes or so to really break up the lecture material. Right, so I have an example of a participatory learning activity on the slide, which is one that I found to be pretty effective, and it's a case study, which I'm sure some of you have heard of before. So this involves, students are presented with an actual problem or situation that maybe has occurred or currently exists in the field, and then they're asked to come up with a solution or a response based on what they've learned in the course. So it's really getting them to apply their knowledge. So I've included an example case study here, just a very brief one, using a biology example. So I can just give you about a minute to read that quickly, just to give you a sense of what a case study may be. So this can be done, a case study can be done in a classroom where students can be separated into groups to discuss the case study, try to come up with a response, and then share the responses collectively as a class at the end. It can also be done virtually when conducting a synchronous lecture. So Blackboard allows you to create breakout sessions. I'm not sure if you've experienced this function so far with the other workshops that perhaps you've attended, where you can just place students into smaller groups and they can then collaborate together. And I will touch on this a little bit more towards the end of the workshop. All right, so now it's time to do another brainstorming activity here. So we want to know, Shane is going to pop up the whiteboard function. So for those who are not familiar with this, you can, if you look at the toolbar at the top, you can use the pencil option where you can write. I find it easiest to use the text, so that's the T icon. So you could just insert your text right on the whiteboard, and we can see everyone's responses. So our question for you is, what are some examples of participatory learning activities that perhaps you've used as a GA, as an instructor, as a TA, or perhaps examples that you've seen instructors use throughout your time as a student? So we'll get you to write down some examples, case studies for sure, video examples, discussion board, mock debates. Those are always really interesting. Kahoot, so using some online polling software, Think, pair, share is a great one. Playing games, so that more of that gamification type of activities. Got a lot of good ones here. Experiments, so that can definitely be helpful depending on the course and the subject. Problem solving competition, of course, with Timbits, that's always a plus as a prize. So theory maps, so I'm thinking that's like a mind map showing connections between different concepts. So we have some people also answering in the chat, real life experiences.
So we have a question here, what is a breakout session? So we use that term a couple of times. So essentially breakout session is basically group work. So when you break everybody up, sort of break everybody up into different groups, and then they can kind of do an activity. You can assign them different components, and then if you choose to, they can all come back as a group and you can debrief together. So you can also do this function here on Blackboard, and Irene's going to talk a bit more about that later, how you can use Blackboard to actually do group work. So we'll also go back through the chat and answer any questions we missed once we get to a question period.
Okay.
You're welcome.
So, thanks everyone for providing some examples here. We have also provided a resource for you, so I'm going to share the link now. So this is going to take you to our OneDrive folder that we've created for this workshop. And so it has a few different documents within there for you to take a look at and use if you'd like. So I've posted the link here. So within that folder, you'll see a PDF called Participatory Learning Activities. So Sham and I have put together some activities that we've used in our own teaching that we found to be effective, and put a brief description there of these. So feel free to use these or modify these as you go. You should be able to access.
Sorry, give me 1 sec. Okay, we'll be sure to, I believe it is, it's publicly accessible, so you don't need to log in or anything, but we'll double check about that and make sure that everybody has access. But let me just display the document so you can kind of get an idea. So if Irene is showing up.
Yep.
Okay, so what you see here is the document that we were referring to. So we have a list of different learning activities that you can use and adapt in your own teaching. This list is by no means exhaustive, so these are just some ideas to sort of spark something that you can do in your own teaching, GAing, etc. So this is available in the folder, and we're going to make sure that you guys are able to access that, of course.
Mm-hmm. So perhaps we can, I'm sure we'll have your email addresses from you registering for this workshop, or perhaps we can get that, and then we can, if need be, send you these via email.
Yes. Okay.
So sorry about that. Okay, so here are just a few examples which you may have already seen, and one of them actually you're already using here, that you can use for as an online tool in Blackboard Collaborate. These functions can be helpful to implement participatory learning activities. So you can collaborate with your students using the whiteboard to draw or just jot down notes or respond to a question posed by the instructor, the GA, for example. So we just use that whiteboard function there, so you kind of have an idea of how that works. And then you can ask students to use the chat feature, which you're currently using, to share ideas or ask questions. So this tool we've found to really encourage students to participate, as most are comfortable with some form of text-based communication rather than speaking aloud or using their mic. And to facilitate small group collaboration, you can create breakout groups that are separate from the main room and assign attendees to them. So, for example, this would be considered a main room for the workshop, but if Shane and I wanted, we could break out all of the participants currently attending into smaller groups, and you can then have discussion and collaborate together. So each breakout group has their own private audio, video, whiteboard, application sharing, and chat. So any collaboration that takes place in the breakout session or breakout group is independent of the main room. And then lastly, you can also keep students engaged by using a polling software, which we also use in today's workshop to give you a sense of that feature. And then you can ask students their opinion on something. Perhaps you can, review material from the, lecture where you covered a certain topic. So just to kind of review. So those are just a few examples there.
Awesome. So Irene and I today sort of modeled some different kinds of activities that you can be using in your own classroom to sort of break up lecture or incorporate within your lectures or classes. But now the question you might be wondering is, how do I choose the right activity for me, for my course, for my class that day? So again, as I said, we're going to come back to the constructive alignment. So you want to keep in mind the alignment of your course. Don't do an activity just for the sake of it. Don't do it just because it sounds fun and it might be cool to try, or just because it's a time filler. You really want the activity to be aligned with the purpose of your class and actually be relevant to the content that you're teaching. So do keep in mind that you want to be intentional when you do pick an activity. And there are also lots of factors you want to consider when deciding whether or not you should do an activity or what kind of activity you should do. So you want to consider your class size. So for example, here we had so many people registered and we have a lot of people here. So there are some activities that we can't really do with such a large group. So in that case, we pick some things that could be working better with a bigger group. You also want to consider things like the time that you have, your resources. Do you have GAs or TAs helping you or not? Are you kind of on your own? What tools are you going to need? So just keep those factors in consideration when you're trying to choose what activity might work for you. And you also want to consider, sometimes an activity isn't the best way to convey information. In our reflection gallery earlier today, some of you said lecturing is really good to get information, as much information to the largest group possible. And that's true sometimes. It might be more effective for you to actually lecture or speak rather than incorporate some sort of activity. So you really want to gauge what the best way is, but do try to incorporate activities to enhance the engagement of your students. So you want to be centering your students' learning. How will students best learn? And sometimes that might be in doing an activity, right? So those are some things to keep in mind. And lastly, whenever possible, make some time after you do an activity with students to reflect and debrief. So kind of like we've been doing after each activity, we sort of come back together as a group and we ask you, okay, what did you guys come up with? What did you guys think? So that'll really help cement those concepts that you're going after and some of those themes. So again, it's about using your time wisely, using the activity wisely, and being super intentional about it. So those are just some things to take into consideration when making that decision in your planning. So once again, we will pause for questions, and I noticed there were a couple in the chat, so we will make sure that we answer those right now. So Irene, I think I saw one earlier in the chat. Did you want to do that?
So is there a general outline available for, oh, sorry, that was answered by Elizabeth. So, okay. Yeah, so there's just the breakout session question, which you've answered. That seems to be it. So if you have any other questions right now that we've kind of tapped into the other few acronyms of OPS, we're more than happy to answer any questions that you may have.
We'll give it a few seconds in case anyone's typing or wants to ask a question out loud. And again, lots of opportunities to ask questions afterwards as well. Okay. Oh, did we get a question?
So where can we draw inspiration for the activities? It's a great question. It really depends on what you're trying to get out of the activity. So if you're really wanting students to perhaps, it's more of an icebreaker and you really want students to get to know each other, just kind of break out of their shell, then, that's going to kind of inspire the type of activity that you do. If it's something where you want students to be more independent, perhaps it's more of like, a writing activity where you have them write a 1-minute paper on, what they've, what they've learned during that lecture or over that certain topic. So I think the inspiration really comes from what the purpose is that you're trying to get out of that activity, but also I think perhaps what has worked well for you in the past or what you think that you're able to or feel confident in doing, because it's really important to, if you are going to do the activity, it's really important to make sure it's as successful as possible and they're really getting a lot out of that or understanding why that activity is being done. So whatever you think that you are competent in doing based on experience or perhaps class size or resources. So there's definitely a lot that goes into it. But another good idea too is just to try to get feedback from your peers. So if you're an instructor, you can ask your colleagues. If you're a GA, perhaps asking other students to see what's worked for them, and that can probably help you get some other ideas that you didn't think of.
Yeah, and sometimes we feel like we have to reinvent the wheel, and we really don't. There's a lot of stuff that's been tried and tested, and we gave you a lot of ideas today, and we have a whole list that we shared with you guys. So go ahead and read some of those, see what other people are doing. Like Irene said, talk to your peers. I think teaching is a lot more collaborative than we actually think. So share ideas amongst your fellow GAs or other instructors in your faculty, people who have taught the course before. What are some things that worked, some things that didn't work? Definitely, and reflect back on your own experiences as a student. What did you particularly enjoy doing that was effective to help you learn something? I think it's very subjective and inspiration can come from anywhere, but those are just some things to help you get started.
Yeah. And Pierre Boulos here added in the chat that the Center for Teaching and Learning has resources. He shared the link to that website. So CTL is a great place to, just brainstorm and get some information. Even just asking those that work at CTL, they're very experienced and knowledgeable in that area, and they're always very welcoming and are very eager to help if you need it to.
Absolutely. Awesome. Okay, so we will keep on going, and then again, any questions, we'll be sure to answer them afterwards as well.
Okay, so how do we know that students are learning? That's really key as well. We can take the time to plan a lecture that we think will be effective, but we really do need to assess if students are actually comprehending the material. So that's where the post-assessment comes in, and this allows both the instructor and students to assess understanding of the lecture material that was covered. So post-assessment activities should be directly aligned with the learning outcomes identified at the beginning of the lecture. So I think we've definitely said that a few times throughout this workshop. Writing and reflection activities are some examples of a post-assessment. So you can ask students to write down their top 3 takeaways from the session. They can turn to the person next to them and tell them the most important thing that they learned from that day or topic. Perhaps developing a 1-minute elevator speech about the topic. So you can definitely be creative with this. I know when you hear post-assessment, your first thing that probably pops in your head is some type of a quiz or review, but you can definitely get more creative with it. But you can use like a polling software if you do want to do some type of online poll or quiz or survey. Another interesting example is an application card. So this would be, giving students a theory or concept that they learned in class and then asking them to come up with 3 applications of this concept from everyday experience, current news, or events. So that's another unique way to test students' knowledge as well. So the last acronym of BOBS is the summary. So I think this is one that's often forgotten in a lecture. So this signals the end of the lecture and then provides the opportunity for the instructor and the learners to summarize the content and conclude the learning experience. So some examples of a summary could be showing a short video that kind of reviews everything that was discussed. The instructor can recap main points of the session using the learning outcomes as prompts. So I think a lot of the times what we do is we present the learning outcomes at the beginning, but we never really go back to them at the end to really make it full circle. So I think that's important to do. But you could also use mind maps to review connections between different ideas and topics, depending on depending on the topic, of course. So those are just a few examples. So we do have a link to this, but this is the link that unfortunately you weren't able to access. We'll definitely sort that out. But what we've shared here is the lesson plan that Shema and I actually used for the workshop today. So we used the BOPS model to plan our workshop. So we've provided this to you so you can get a sense of what's involved in creating a lesson plan. And then we've also added a blank lesson plan template for you to use in the future if you'd like, and if you feel like it would be effective for your lecture.
Yeah, and a common question that people ask is BOPS the only way to plan a lesson? And the answer is no, absolutely not. There's so many ways that you can go about it. You want to do really what works best for you, but BOPS is a method that's used quite widely. Like Irene said, we use it for this workshop. I've used it in my own teaching and planning. So it's something that has like really basic components that can help guide your own planning. And really planning is your best friend. So we kind of go hard on this and we plan it minute by minute, but again, do whatever works best for you. But it has some key components that help you start off strong, engage students throughout, and finish off strong too. So this is just more of a base guideline for you to use and adapt into your own planning.
Mm-hmm. And I guess I should note as well that you can spend lots of time with creating your lesson plan and breaking it up by time, but of course it never always goes as planned, but it is nice to have that structure and that starting point when organizing your lectures.
Right, and you can even like plan backup plans within your lesson plan. Say like if I go overtime, this is something I can cut out. You can sort of make note of that. Or if I go under time in my class today, this is some other stuff I can cover. So really, you can use this to help sort of guide you. And again, trial and error, see what works, see what doesn't. Format this in however way is easiest for you.
And once you do, use that lesson plan, it's nice to reflect after you've delivered the lecture and really, maybe even just jot down what worked really well or what activities didn't work out so well. How would you do that better in the future so that if you were to teach that again, you would have that reference or those notes there.
Yeah, absolutely. Awesome. So you've planned your lesson, you've planned your outcomes, you have your activities, but now how do you choose how to deliver this? Where do you even start? So I want to just preface this by saying, like, some of you might be wondering, like, okay, what am I even supposed to be teaching? What concepts? Where do I get my content from? And a lot of you, the majority of you, are GAs, so chances are you'll probably be communicating with your supervisor or professor over the next couple weeks as classes start, and the professor will essentially say, these are the things you should cover. Some of them might even tell you, okay, I want you to do a discussion every single week. Some of that might already be laid out for you, right? But that doesn't mean that you don't have a level of planning that you need to do on your own. You still need to design your discussion questions. You still need to pick, activities if you want to do them, things like that. But really, when it comes to choosing the delivery method, how you're actually going to present all this information and content, you want to ask yourself two main things. First, what do I want students to learn? So whether that's, the learning outcomes that you designed for the class, or you can refer back to the learning outcomes for that particular course that the professor has laid out. So what are students supposed to be learning? And the next thing you want to ask yourself is, what are the strategies and the activities and the content that's going to help them learn that? So that'll help you decide, okay, what's the best way for me to deliver this method? And when we talk about online teaching specifically, there are really two main methods that you might have heard about. So the first is synchronous, so that's the real-time live teaching, and the second is asynchronous, so not live, pre-recorded. So synchronous is what we're doing today. So we're doing a live session in a virtual classroom, which is Blackboard Collaborate that we're using. So synchronous includes things like your live streams, virtual classes, live discussions, doing those breakout groups, other sort of in real-time activities. Whereas asynchronous refers to things like recorded videos, PowerPoint presentations, even slides with narration. I've seen professors do things like deliver, one or two classes as podcasts where they record a short lecture in audio form. They even punctuate it with like music in between. So there's really a lot of creative ways you can go about it. And things like discussion boards, forums where students are kind of doing things on their own time. And then maybe you have a mix of both. Maybe some things are live, some things aren't, some things are pre-recorded. So really, some of it might already be set up for you by your professor or your supervisor. Some things maybe you have a bit more freedom. But again, ask yourself these questions, see what works best for you. Even survey students, like ask student feedback, like what helps them. And I noticed actually the university today launched a survey, like what students prefer in terms of their online learning. So it'll be interesting to see those results. But again, it's whatever works best for you, whatever is required of the class, of the content, and things like that. And that being said, also make use of your office hours. Really make yourself available to students. I mean, we're all kind of in new territory here teaching online, so really use those office hours to be present for students so that they can come get some extra help, ask questions and things like that to help us all navigate the situation that we're all in. So these are just some considerations to keep in mind as well. So with that, are there any questions up until this point so far, now that we've covered all of BOPS? Or nearly all of BOPS. Okay, again, lots of opportunity to ask questions at the end of our session today. So if anything comes to mind, just jot it down and we can come back to it at the end as well. So we will keep moving on.
All right, so given that we're going to be online this fall, we really wanted to give you a little bit of information, just some tips for engaging students in online lectures. And majority of these can be applicable to in-person as well, but just really wanted to focus on the online aspect. So the first is chunk the lecture. So, as I've already mentioned earlier, long lectures probably aren't the best way to engage students in a face-to-face class, but it's even more ineffective online. So just trying to present information in about 10 to 20-minute chunks, and then trying to break that up with some sort of video if you can, or activity or discussion. And it's good to try to design the lessons with, lots of pictures, lots of examples, maybe bigger text, so not, loading the page with text, and trying to incorporate color as much as you can when applicable. Pose and respond to student questions. So similar to what we have in this workshop, it's nice to allow some time throughout the lecture or the lesson to allow students to ask questions. And as the instructor, it can be difficult to try to tend to those questions in the chat, for example, while delivering the material. So it's nice to have a GA or TA to monitor that chat and try to pick some questions that are appropriate for that particular topic or that moment. So that's important to consider as well. And given that, it's not, when you're online, it's not like you're meeting, your students in person. So as a GA, TA, instructor, really try to insert yourself into the lecture, because you won't have that same connection as you do face-to-face. We do have to put a little more effort into really trying to connect with students. So try to include a personal story or personal experience into the lecture, add some humor, and just try to add a few personal touches here and there to really try to build some type of a relationship with your students. And lastly, check in with students. So if you notice that they're disengaged, try to check in with them personally. Try to help them stay focused with constant feedback, contacting, monitoring their engagement on Blackboard, for example. So these are just a few general guidelines to keep in mind when lecturing or just being a GA instructor TA online. So we are going to do a very quick review to kind of recap what we talked about in today's workshop. So we're going to use the polling feature again. So just 1 second here. Okay. So what component of the BOPS model involves grabbing students' attention? We have pre-assessment, learning outcomes, bridge-in, and participatory learning activities. Give about a minute or so. Put in your response. Okay, so the answer here was bridge-in. Yep, so bridge-in's used to typically at the beginning to really try to get students' attention, so that way you can try to keep them engaged throughout the lecture. All right, so next question here. So which delivery method is not considered asynchronous? If you have recorded videos, breakout groups, podcasts, recorded PowerPoint presentation. Can everyone see the poll there? Not allowing you to select. Okay, 1 second here. Okay, now try to see if that works. Okay, there we go. Sorry about that. All right, so the answer here is breakout groups. So that is an example. All right, so I will go to the last question here, which is, which component of the BOPS model involves evaluating students' understanding of the material? Okay, so the answer is post-assessment. Majority of you said that. So it looks like you're really getting the hang of things there. So that's great.
Awesome.
Okay.
Thank you guys for answering those questions. So good to see that a lot of you got those spot on, and we just wanted to test your knowledge there at the end. So just to wrap things up and kind of bring us back to our learning outcomes that we shared at the onset of class today or the session today. So we hope that at the end of this workshop now that you are comfortable and more confident being able to distinguish the characteristics of what makes an effective versus an ineffective lecture. We also hope that you feel more prepared to use the BOPS model to plan out your lectures and classes. And lastly, we hope that we've helped you identify the various diverse learning activities that you can use in your own teaching to help really enhance your students' engagement, whether you're doing this in person or online this semester. So we also wanted to share a few resources that are available to you to help you really make the most of this coming semester online. So the first is the University of Windsor's Teaching Online website or webpage. So this was made in collaboration with the Center for Teaching and Learning and the Office of Open Learning, and they've put together a lot of great resources for teaching online, so things like lecture preparation, how to communicate with students. They even have support for GAs and TAs and lots of resources that you can access. So Irene has shared the link in the chat, and that is free for you to use. And we have also included this amongst many other links in our resource workshop folder, which again, we'll make sure that's working for you guys. So this is a resource sheet Irene and I put together that has a bunch of links from both the university and outside the university, as well as some further reading material that you might want to look into, for your own personal self-development as an instructor or as a GA. So we hope that you found these to be helpful for you. So before we end off, before we jump into our Q&A, we want to first thank you all for joining us today. And we'd really appreciate if you actually rate how today's session went and provide us with feedback by clicking on the feedback link that Irene will also share here. So at this link, you can essentially tell us how we performed today and what feedback you would give us to make our sessions even better in the future. So thank you guys again. We're going to now open up the floor for Q&A. But if you have to leave, or if there isn't, if we aren't able to answer your question, or if something comes up later on, please feel free to email us. Our emails are on the screen now. So once again, please do go ahead and fill out that feedback form. And if you have any questions, we'll take them now. Thank you guys so much for joining us today. We apologize as we were trying to sort of figure this out, but this is a really good reminder for me to tell you the CTL has a lot of great workshops happening about how to use Blackboard, how to teach online, so please do take advantage of those, as well as the rest of the workshops in GATAcademy happening for the rest of this week. So with that, thank you guys for joining us. We'll open up the floor to any questions, and then we will wrap up. So let's see what we have here. Thank you guys. Yes, so Irene shared the link for the feedback form right here. So it's the Google form, and you can take your time filling that out at the end of the session.
So we have about 15 minutes still, so we're happy to stay and even just having some discussion, of course, questions like we've said, whatever you're thinking.
You can also raise your hand if you want to turn your mic on, and we're happy to do that. Thank you, everyone. Oh, okay, we have a question here. Abdul?
Yeah, for me, again, this is my first time kind of running a full course online, and there are so many technologies out there. My head is spinning. Like every day, people tell me about this technology or that technology, and so I'm kind of thoroughly confused because activities is important, but I have no idea in terms of where am I drawing the boundary lines? Like what kind of technologies do you guys stick around, or do you prefer, or what works for you? If you can share some of your own insights.
Sure.
Yeah,
Uh,
Irene, you want to go ahead?
Actually, Blackboard Collaborate, what we're using now, I'm finding is great for online learning, like the participatory learning stuff, because a lot of the functions are all within the same software. So you have the polling feature, you have the whiteboard feature, you have the breakout sessions. So all of that is done within one platform, rather than, because there are polling softwares like Mentimeter that we used earlier, and that's a great program, but it can be difficult and it can get messy if you're trying to go back and forth from, if you're using Teams or Blackboard Collaborate and then going to Mentimeter and then trying to come back and share your slides. So it does get a little bit confusing and can sometimes be overwhelming. So I think the more functions you have in one place, the better. So that's why I would say Blackboard Collaborate, because Teams, for example, or Zoom, they don't have the same type of interactive functions.
Mm-hmm. Yeah, I agree with Irene. I think try to really make the most of the platform that we have here. So a lot of I know instructors will go out. They may be comfortable using Microsoft Teams or something on the outside, but really students, what are they using? They're using Blackboard for the most part. So try your best to work within what you have. And there's actually a lot of things that Irene mentioned are already embedded here. And there's a great workshop about using Blackboard and making the most of Blackboard. So that even helped me when I was trying to figure out, what should I plan, what activities should we do, and things like that. And the other thing I want to mention also is that, just keep it simple to start off. Just keep it simple. You don't have to be doing too much. Even for us today, we kind of tried different things just because we wanted to show you guys, you can do a reflection gallery in Google Forms, or you can do a poll in Menti. But a lot of these things you can do right here in Blackboard. You can use the whiteboard. You can use the polling sort of mechanism here in Blackboard. But what class are you teaching? If you want to tell.
For sure, yeah. I teach social work, and I teach the advanced standing students. I teach the master level student, but I also
Mhm.
teach other universities. I also teach Ryerson University. I'm on contract, so I'm all over the place.
Right. Yeah.
Um, so kind of trying to wrap my head around what would be the best strategy. But like with social work, there are not very many videos out there, just like maybe in geography or history, you have lots of videos, documentary that you can show. Social work, there's hardly any kind of videos or documentaries or anything like that. Maybe a social policy might be okay, but not
Mhm.
social
Mhm.
work proper in terms of counseling. So those are the kind of things that I am kind of struggling with. But I do
Yeah.
like your idea of the Microsoft Forms, and I think I might incorporate that.
Yeah, and it's a really
The
easy
reflection piece.
process. Yeah, it's a very easy function to use.
Mhm.
But I'm obviously not an expert in social work, but perhaps could you use like the case study that format that we talked about earlier today? Perhaps even just drawing on your own experiences and forming a case study, or coming up with some scenarios that
Yeah.
way. If there aren't so
Right.
many
We had
videos.
actually at one session that Irene and I taught, we had a social work instructor actually who was in attendance, and she really liked the idea of using case studies. So what she
Mm.
did was she sort of adapted that, and she kind of designed a sort of what would you do kind of activity for her students, where she came up with these different scenarios. She'd break them out into groups. They have to come up with, sort of like, it was kind of like a problem solving thing, and then they kind of
Mhm.
came back together, and each group sort of shared what they came up with. And I believe actually our own School of Social Work recently released the sort of video module too that you might want to incorporate. It was kind of like the
Mhm.
same what would you do, like
Right. Right.
whatever, do your own story kind of thing, where you sort of pick, are you going to do this or that, and it would take you down a
Right.
different path. So I think for sure keep it simple, keep it to what you know, but yeah, try to incorporate like little elements. It doesn't have to be like a full class activity every single class, but Yeah, they're just little things that you could incorporate, little polls, little case studies, things like that. Even just having a reflection where you pose a question and open up for discussion.
Yeah.
Even April mentioned she really liked breakout groups in her graduate course. So breakout groups are great, especially for smaller classes. You can really make use of that here in Blackboard as well.
Yeah. Thank you.
Thanks for the question.
Are you going to make your presentation available for us to?
Yes, we will make our slides available and we'll put them all in that folder, and we'll make sure that we email the folder out to everybody who attended today as well.
Okay.
Yeah, for sure.
Okay, thank you.
Thanks a lot.
What about Zoom? If you want to use Zoom, what do you think about using Zoom?
Zoom?
Yeah.
I don't mind Zoom if it's for in my opinion, just my experience, if it's for more of like office hours and just meeting in that sense. I think it's great, and I use Zoom a lot for meetings. But if you are trying to incorporate more of those activities and interactive components, then I think that Blackboard Collaborate is very helpful.
That Blackboard collaborative.
Yeah, I think
Is there
Blackboard
anywhere one can
is accessible. Yeah,
is there
sorry, go ahead.
anywhere one can read something on how to use it? I am really naive with that Blackboard collaborative. How to use it?
How to use Blackboard?
Yeah.
Yeah, so I'm sure every instructor, every GA has something called a virtual classroom or Blackboard Collaborate Ultra. So if you go onto your course Blackboard site, you can actually add, you know how you have a menu that says, you know, resources, lectures, whatever. You have like a menu panel, and you can actually add a module to that called, and you can call it a virtual classroom. Essentially what that is, they call it in Blackboard something fancy, like Blackboard Collaborate Ultra. We just call it virtual classroom. And basically you can set up sessions. You can have like one room that's open, people can come in and out. Or you can set up sessions that have, okay, on this date, there's going to be a class on this date. There's actually a really great class or workshop taught by Mark Lobrick about how to use Blackboard virtual classroom. So we really recommend that. And Pierre just shared a link as well, so thank you very much. So this workshop was extremely helpful for me because I had no idea how to use Blackboard before all this, like the virtual classroom. So we really recommend taking this class and really practicing how to use Blackboard before you actually go in. There's really a lot of features in here that I'm really glad that we took advantage of today. So yeah, lots to do in this platform. Before you considering going to other platforms, really see how much you can do with Blackboard. So yeah, I definitely recommend taking that workshop. It'll explain everything step by step, from setting it up to doing activities in it, how to, control students and things like that. So really recommend taking that workshop.
And Daria posted in the chat, one of the attendees, that Zoom is not supported by the university, whereas Blackboard and Teams are. So I think that's a great point as well. So, I think it's a safer format to use Blackboard or Teams, because then you know that students do have access to those platforms.
Yeah, and you don't want to be paying for like a premium version of Zoom, because Zoom has limits too. You can only have a certain number of people for a certain number of minutes. You don't want to be paying extra. So we have things like Blackboard that's already within your own sort of role as an instructor, as a GA.
Okay.
So yeah. Any other questions?
Thank you very much.
Thank you. Yeah, so there's a link here with all the workshops that are being offered. Just go through them, find the ones that you think would be most helpful to you. That's kind of what I do. I'm always like on the CTL site, and I'm always looking at what workshops really sort of pique my interest, or that maybe some areas I'm more deficient in that I need some extra help in. So lots of resources through the Center for Teaching and Learning here, and they're totally free for you as instructors and students, which is awesome. Okay, any other questions? Awesome.
Well, we'll stick around for the next 5 minutes in case anything comes up or comes to mind.
So again, if anybody's still here, make sure you fill out that feedback form. The link was posted here in the chat. Let us know how we did. So that will really help us improve. The feedback every session helps us make the next one even better. So this is our first time doing this online, so we're really curious to know what you thought. So please do leave us any comments, and Irene just posted the link again to the feedback form. So feel free to fill that out, rate our performance, let us know how we did. Maybe we'll come back next time. We did okay. No, I'm just kidding. Thank you very much. Yeah, we'll just hang around here till 4:30 when we officially end off. So again, any questions, feel free to throw them out there. And we'll just be hanging out here. If you have to leave, thank you again so much for joining us. And we hope that you attend the many other awesome workshops put on by the GATAcademy and the CTL. They are excellent. I've taken them personally as a GA. They are really good. So hope you guys benefit greatly from those this week. So I got a question that was sent to me directly. I think it was meant to be sent to the whole group, but someone was asking, is there a certificate for attending? So there's no individual certificates for attending, but actually whenever you register or enroll and attend one of these kinds of workshops, CTL actually has a transcript that you can download from your account where you go to register, and it shows every single workshop that you've attended. Even if you've taught some workshops, it'll show you the workshops you've taught. So that's a really great resource. I actually incorporated that recently into my own teaching dossier, which is all of my teaching and learning experience. So really recommend that as well. If you want, some sort of credentials that you attended these workshops, do make use of the transcript that you can download right from the registration page. Yep, just as Elizabeth just posted, that's exactly what it is. You can download your transcript, and it lists all the workshops that you've attended for the past several years.
right. Well, it's 4:30 on the dot now. So I just want to say thank you again so much for attending today's session. We hope you were able to gather some important info that you can use in your own teaching practices. So we will